Thank you, Ms. Smith, for your testimony. The chair now recognizes Rabbi Saperstein for his 5 minutes. Rabbi?
Chair King, Ranking Member Cohen, members of the committee. Over the past 2 years, I was honored to serve as the United States Ambassador at Large for International. Is this on?
Turn on your mic, please.
Sorry. Over the past 2 years, I was honored to serve as the U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom and had the privilege to work closely with many of you on both sides of the aisle and many of those in the organizations represented here. This was an issue that galvanized people across ideological, religious, political lines, and I would acknowledge particularly Mr. Frank's work in this effort. It's therefore especially painful for me that in our own nation, a limited number of core issues of religious freedom so divide us. While I believe the issues we discuss here are of the utmost importance, at this time when we are reflecting on the state of religious liberty in the United States, let us not lose sight of the fact that compared to other nations, the freedoms we have to worship, to organize our religious institution in communities as we see fit, to celebrate our festivals openly, freely and safely, to proselytize, teach, preach as we see fit, remains inspiring. Permit me to focus on 3 general areas this afternoon: the executive order on immigration refugee, the Johnson Amendment repeal, and the purported executive order on religious freedom. The widespread opposition to the Muslim ban is set in the context and heard through the filter of months of anti-Muslim rhetoric in the campaign, threats of a Muslim registry, the president's explicit statements even after the election referencing a Muslim refugee ban, significant increase in hate crimes. You alluded, Mr. Cohen, to the new report that came out from the Southern Poverty Law Center and the spate of new anti-Muslim hate groups, reports of children who are bullied at school, increased opposition to mosques being built in communities, desecration, arson of mosques and other communal sites, harassment on the internet by strangers on the street. As I have found in so many nations across the globe, impingement on religious freedom includes the pressures and fears that emanate from perceived societal and governmental hostility, which chill open expression of religious identity and communal life. The president has indicated that he wants to change the Johnson Amendment, totally destroy it, as he said at the National Prayer Breakfast, which prohibits houses of worship, like all tax-exempt organizations, from endorsing or opposing political candidates and parties. There are 4 reasons why the amendment should not be changed. First, if houses of worship become involved in campaigning, they run a serious risk of new extensive government regulation and monitoring of their religious activities. Second, the prohibition against electioneering by nonprofits helps avoid undermining the structure of campaign finance regulations. If political donors can bypass those restrictions by giving their campaign contributions through a church and getting a tax deduction for it, it will result in a major diversion of campaign funding into houses of worship, which will become slush funds for campaigns. And since churches do not report who their donors are, it would greatly reduce transparency in election campaigns. Third, repealing current law would almost certainly have a divisive impact on houses of worship. We have enough divisions over liturgy and music and pastors and sermons and theology without importing America's explosively divisive electoral politics. Our houses of worship are among the few places that people of differing cultural, political, ethnic divides can find a sense of unity and comedy so desperately needed in our nation today. And finally, pastors and clergy already have the right to speak about political issues and even those being debated in campaigns from the pulpit under the current rules in a personal capacity without the use of church funding. Clergy have the same citizen rights to endorse or oppose candidates or parties or anyone else. The draft executive order that has been reported raises a number of issues of primary concern. But at the core of those concerns is the notion of a free exercise claim to discriminate. To my colleagues here and the distinguished members of the committee, help me understand what are the limits of this right being asserted to discriminate. If an employer, small business owner, or head of a religiously affiliated nonprofit asserts a sincere religious belief that blacks are inferior to whites, Catholics, Muslims, Jews, and Hindus inferior to Protestants, differently abled inferior to non-disabled, Latinos to Anglos, if they assert a sincere belief that religious quality of their business or their nonprofit requires that they only serve or hire those of the same religion, do they have the right to bar those customers and employees who are members of what are protected classes? Even if we agree that racial discrimination should be treated differently, if religious claims to discriminate must be accommodated, it threatens the entire scheme of civil rights. It will affect the LGBT community particularly, women particularly here, and the principle that government money should not be used in tax dollars to discriminate is an important bedrock core. Our courts, including the Supreme Court today, has upheld the right, the compelling interest to end discrimination as a justification to limit the free exercise of religion. We need to work together to find ways to balance it, to embody as much as possible without losing either of the two principles.
Thank you, Rabbi Saperstein. Chair now recognize Mr. Maddox for his testimony.